Okay. Just admitting people here. There we go. Okay. Okay. 1 second. Okay, here we go. Welcome everyone to Fundamentals of Kabbalah and Hasidut. We are continuing our series on Maaseh Merkavah, the workings of the Chariot. I want to begin with a very, very important statement or subject that we haven't really talked about, and that is the idea that in prophecy or divine inspiration, the person that the prophecy or the Ruach HaKodesh, divine inspiration, is coming through is not always aware of the full ramifications of what they're going to write about it. Here, we're talking about written text, the vision of Ezekiel. He wrote it. But in the experience itself, the prophet is trying to be true to the vision that they have, and they record it as it came through. Or many people who have artistic or creative urges, and sometimes a poem just like comes through us, a song it just seems to come from above, and we're just catching it. Actually, Reb Shlomo used to say about how he would compose music. He would say he just hears what's happening up above, and he just tries to be a vessel to bring it down. It's not composing in the usual way that we think about it, just being a vessel. So I'm mentioning this because what we're going to learn tonight is, in my eyes, a very enlightening and even astounding understanding of the vision of Ezekiel that was only really revealed recently through physics and science. So this is a big subject in of itself. For those who have my book on prophecy, I write extensively about this, that there are many, many incidences in the Torah where people give blessings, or the Torah itself describes certain realities, and we don't see the full weight or manifestation. It could be generations later, it could be millennium later. And this is happening very, very prominently when people, and many books have been written about this, try to correlate, parallel what Kabbalah or even the Torah itself says about creation, call it Torah cosmology, Kabbalistic cosmology, and what modern cosmology, based on science and physics and quantum physics and astronomy, tell us. And now we're seeing incredible revelations in the Torah text that we might not have really understood until now. So I'm mentioning all of this because the teachings I hope to give over tonight are in this realm, that we're going to look at a completely different dimension of the vision of Ezekiel that only now can we really understand it on a deeper level. But we can see that embedded in his vision, embedded in his description of his vision, are the keys to this deeper dimension of understanding. So with that introduction, I want to show you that a good part of what we're going to be learning tonight comes from this book from Rav Ginsburg. It's called 137, The Riddle of Creation. An entire book about the number 137. And it is a thick book. And so what I'm going to give over, he didn't give over per se as connected to Maaseh Merkavah. Though we're going to see immediately it is connected to Maaseh Merkavah. But I'm just pointing out that this book, as we're going to see in a minute, is taking this number, which is considered probably the most important number in physics today, and for a whole generation, 137, and try to understand its connection to the vision of Yechezkel. So Rav Ginsburg begins by saying that he's proposing a Hebrew name for an electron. In other words, in Hebrew, what would be an appropriate word? In other words, instead of like just taking the English and kind of changing it a little bit, in Hebrew, in Adam, there are different words for it. Is just based on the English, or in Hebrew, television is televisia. I mean, it's basically the same thing. I'm not sure what you're trying to show me, Susan. An iPhone. Afterwards, you'll write a chat. So he proposes that a proper name for an electron in Hebrew would be Ophan. Ophan, Aleph, Vav, Pe, Nun. Now, that should immediately alert us that the Ophanim play a major part of the vision of Ezekiel. They're what are called the wheel angels, the Ophanim. And in the first 28 verses, which forms the basis of what we call Maaseh Merkavah, the Ophanim are mentioned many times. And especially in one verse where Ezekiel sees an Ophan within an Ophan, a wheel within a wheel. And there we talked extensively about this idea of interinclusion, of fractals, of what's called enclothement. One thing enclosed within another. And so he proposes that this would be the perfect word for an electron. An electron is within the atom, and it is circling the atom in orbits. A wheel within a wheel. In other words, this particle, which we call the electron, is circling like a wheel within the atom, which is conceived as a circle, a wheel within a wheel. But then Rav Ginsburg points out that the numerical value of Ophan is 137. So what's the big deal? In other words, why would we write an entire book about the number 137? And the reason is and why it is such an important idea in physics is it is called the fine structure constant. The fine structure constant. Sometimes it's called the coupling constant because it is connecting in a certain way two realities together. Where does the number 137 comes from? 137 is it's the maximum speed of an electron is 1 over 137 times the speed of light. This is a constant. And so when science looks at this number, we know that everything in physical existence is made up of atoms. And every atom has many particles in it. One of the most important is the electron. And therefore, this number, 1 over 137, represents not only the speed of an electron in relationship to the speed of light. We know from Einstein's classic formula, E equals mc squared, where this is the formula that changed all of science, because from this we understand that all of matter is energy. And all of matter and energy are intrinsically linked to light. So here we have the idea that 1 over 137 is the ratio of the speed of an electron in relationship to the speed of light. So this is why it is such an important number in science. Now, we're going to apply this slowly to the vision of Ezekiel to see what this is telling us. But I want to add another thing that's very, very important, because we know that light are packets or particles called photons. And in science, what happens is when a photon is absorbed by an electron, it transforms energy into matter. Now, this is the basis of all creation, of all reality, because if all matter ultimately is energy, and the relationship between matter and energy is based on this number 137, then we can see why it's such an important number. Because everything is in our physical universe is matter, and yet we're told that ultimately it's really energy. And so the relationship between a photon and an electron is the basis of all reality. That's why it's so important. Now, we'll go one step further, is call it the mysterious, mystical, paradoxical nature of light. Is a photon is massless. It has no mass, which in a certain way boggles the mind, that if it's a reality, how can it not have mass? But a photon has no mass. And so what happens, the photon is a massless energy. The electron is the elementary particle of matter. So here we see why it's called the coupling effect. The coupling constant is all of reality is this coupling of matter and energy, light and matter, photon and electron. So the fact that the Ophan, this wheel energy, wheel angel in his vision is so prominent is something that we've been trying to explain the whole series. But here we're seeing a physical, scientific explanation in a certain way. We've mentioned that Yechezkel, even though he's seeing his vision through what's called the world of Yetzirah, the world of formation, which is one world above our purely material physical world, the world of action. But we've mentioned many times, and we will continue to mention it tonight, that he is seeing Ophanim, wheel and angels. He's seeing Chariot, living beings. He's seeing fire. He's seeing glows. He's seeing the chashmal. And then ultimately, at the end of the vision, he begins to see the throne of God and phenomena like a rainbow and like the energy levels keep on going higher and higher. So one of the verses that we learned and we see throughout the workings of the chariot, the linking between the Ophanim and the Chayot. And these are some of the hardest verses to understand, where it talks about the movement of the chariot. And it says that when the Chayot would move, the Ophanim would move. And when the Chayot rose up, the Ophanim would rise up. And so it's in very physical terms, but one of the verses we read was the Haruach. One second. Haruach lelechet yelchu shama, haruach lelechet v'haofanim yinasu lumatam ki ruach hachaya be'ofanim. That, again, it's just explaining how the Ophanim and the Chayot are intrinsically moving together. But then it says that the spirit of the Chayot are in the Ophanim. And then last week we learned that because of the movement that is being explained, this is where we get the idea of a chariot. And then we saw that on the chariot, he sees a throne and a vision of a man on the throne. And what we described last week is he's now experiencing all of the different worlds. Olam ha'asiyah, olam ha'yitzirah, olam ha'briyah, olam ha'atzilut. He is experiencing all the different worlds. And so we also learned one of the commentaries that said that God was riding on the Chayot, and the Chayot were riding on the Ophanim. So here, to connect to what we've been learning about this number 137 and the coupling constant between energy and matter. So we notice that his vision is being explained in a certain very physical terms. He's trying to explain his vision with physical metaphors. And yet, a number of times he says that these are visions of God. And so what he's seeing is not physical at all, but everything that we try to explain has to be in language that a human being can explain. And so he's explaining the movement of the chariot. Even the idea of a chariot itself is a physical vehicle that has wheels, and it's carrying the throne. And on the throne is the physical appearance of a man. But we learned that it wasn't really a man that he was seeing, because God has no description. God has no approximation of explaining what you're seeing. And so Ezekiel is calling this vision of God a man. This is something that we have to go into even further. So now I'm going to put this in like kind of like an aside, but it's very, very fascinating, because here we're talking about the coupling between matter and energy, between a photon and an electron. And so Rav Ginsburg now proposes another name in Hebrew for a photon. So he proposes called Agalei Tal, which is translated drops of dew. This comes from the book of Job in the 38th chapter, where he's describing a certain reality of drops of dew. Now, what's interesting is Rashi, this word Agalei Tal, for those who are taking notes, it's Aleph Gimel Lamed Yud, Agalei Tal, Tet Lamed, drops of dew. Rashi points out, though, that the word Agalei, which means drops, is based on the word gal, which means a wave. This is Rashi. And this is an example that I would assume that he didn't truly understand the ramifications of what he was saying here. Because he's saying, instead of understanding them as drops, we should understand them as waves. Now, I think everyone is aware that this is one of the greatest mysteries of science about light, that light is both a particle and a wave. It's like a drop of dew, and it's a wave of dew. So this, again, is an astounding idea here, because all of Ezekiel's vision here, it's constantly fire and this noga, this ethereal kind of vision that he's seeing, the aura of the fire. And within the fire is the chashmal. Now, chashmal, as we've discussed, is the epitome of paradox, because chash means silent, mal means speaking. And of course, we spent a considerable amount of time discussing the paradox of chashmal. But here, what it's hinting to is, in all of science, now they've found out now it's not just that light exhibits a particle and a wave function. It's all matter. Every atom also exhibits a particle-like structure and a wave-like structure. And that's why they now say that an electron is not a specific entity at this point. It is in a wave function. It could be here, it could be there, it could be both simultaneously until it's observed. Once it's observed, then the electron can be seen to be an entity in a certain place. But the mystery of quantum physics is you can't ever measure accurately the place and velocity of a particle. It's like impossible to do both of them simultaneously. So here, I'm trying to put it together, is we've had this mysterious word chashmal throughout the vision. We're going to see it further. And here we're seeing that in modern science, it's talking about these paradoxes, and it's talking about the coupling between matter and energy. And on a very deep level, this is what Yechezkel is trying to explain to us. He is being shown the fabric of the universe. That has been our, in a certain way, the major theme of trying to understand what he's being shown. And we've mentioned this a number of times, that the two great wisdoms in the Jewish mystical tradition, one is called Maaseh Bereshit, the workings of creation, and the workings of the chariot. And as we've mentioned a number of times, in a certain way, Maaseh Bereshit is the 7 days of creation, as written in the Torah. And then, of course, all of the secrets that are written about these 7 days in the Talmud, in the Midrash, in the Kabbalah. That's Maaseh Bereshit. But Maaseh Merkavah is considered even the more inside, in Hebrew, the pnimius, the more inner workings of creation. And here, I believe that we mentioned this once, that we know that the world was created with 10 expressions. 10 expressions. And we know that when the Torah was originally, or in the beginning of the revelation of Sinai, we received the 10 commandments. So of course, there's a deep connection between the 10 sayings of creation and the 10 commandments. The 10 commandments are seen as the fulfillment of the purpose of creation. And so here, this is my own idea here. But if you look at the word Ophan, so it's an Aleph and Vav, together that equals 7. And Pei and Nun equals 130. 130 equals the word Sinai. The Aleph and the Vav equals 7. We have a very well-known midrash that part of the mystical experience that all Israel saw and heard in really a synesthesia type of experience, where all of the senses, all of the dimensions melded together, the idea that the 7 heavens opened up. This is a well-known midrash, that at Mount Sinai, the 7 heavens opened up. So if you look at the word Ophan, so the Aleph and the Vav is 7, and the Pei and the Nun is 130. 130 equals Sinai. Aleph and Vav is 7. The 7 heavens opened up at Sinai. When do we read the vision of Yechezkel? On Shavuos, when we read about receiving the Torah at Sinai. That is the Haftorah for Shavuos. So there's a deep connection between the experience at Sinai and Yechezkel's experience of the Merkavah. That's why it was chosen. Of all of the possibilities of the Haftarah, Maseh Merkavah, because the experience that the people went through was very similar to the experience of Yechezkel. And the experience at Sinai was the merger of all of the dimensions. And this is what it means when it says that the mountain of Sinai was full of smoke. And remember, the word for smoke is Ashan, Ayin, Shin, Nun. And we're told, what does it mean that the mountain was full of smoke? Okay, it says that God came down on Mount Sinai in fire. So there was smoke. But it's explained in Kabbalah that the Ayin stands for Olam, the first letter of the word Olam, which means worlds. The Shin of Ashan, smoke, stands for Shana, year, which means time. And the Nun of Ashan is Nefesh, soul and consciousness. And so we're told what it means that the whole mountain was full of smoke means that all of the dimension in people's consciousness, it was a mass prophetic experience. All of the dimensions merged of space, olam, world means space, shana, year means time, nefesh means consciousness. So space, time, and consciousness all merge together. And the Midrash explains that as the seven heavens opening up. So it's just incredible that in the word Ophan, you see a hint to the experience at Sinai. Now, another very incredible connection is towards the end of his vision. So it says that he saw above the rakia, above the firmament that was above the heads of these angels, he saw a precious sapphire stone that had the appearance of a throne, and on the throne the appearance of a man. And then it says that there was the chashmal, but then it says he also saw the appearance of a rainbow that was in a cloud on the day of rain. Just like you would, after a rain, you would see a rainbow. And around the rainbow, again, was this noga, this ethereal aura. So here, let's look at the word Ophan again. So Aleph and Vav, again, equals 7. Well, the rainbow is made of 7 colors. And the Pei and the Nun, again, means panemius, the inside. And so really, again, he's envisioning a rainbow and the aura of a rainbow on a cloudy day. But that is a physical description of a spiritual experience that he's having. It's not like he's not seeing this in his mind's eye. But what he's seeing is more a reflection of the revelation that he's receiving. And the revelation that he's receiving is of the merger of all the dimensions. And in simple terms, this is really the essence of Judaism's most fundamental statement of faith. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. He's seeing everything as one. All the worlds matter and energy. It's all one. It's all one. That's the essence of his vision here. Okay, now let's go further. This number 137, so everyone points out, this just happens to be the numerical value of the word Kabbalah. Our received mystical tradition is called Kabbalah. Kabbalah means to receive, but it also means to make correspondences. And in fact, in the Torah itself, the only time that the root word, kuf bet lamed, appears in the Torah is not to receive. It means to make correspondences. Lahakbil. So here, what we see that the essence of Kabbalah is the ability to see correspondences between different phenomena. That's the essence of Kabbalah. Why? Is because the place that this appears in the Torah is when the curtains of the Mishkan are put together. There were two curtains. There were actually a number of curtains on one side and a number of curtains on another side. And one side had 50 loops, and the other side had 50 loops. And then the instruction in the Torah was to take clasps and connect the loops together. And as we've explained, an example is you put on your shirt or your blouse quickly, and then you look in the mirror and you see that you didn't get the button in the right hole. So to make proper correspondences is not so simple. In our life, what it means is 24/7, we are bombarded with stimuli. Even when we're sleeping, it's 24/7. To make the proper correspondences between the things that are happening in our life, this is what is called wisdom. And so Kabbalah is the wisdom or the art of seeing correspondences. And then in the Torah, it says that you put the clasp and you bring the curtains together. And then it says, V'haya hamishkan echad. And then the tabernacle becomes one. Because the tabernacle was surrounded by these curtains. And so by putting the curtains together, you unify the space that is now called the tabernacle. But here the idea is to make the tabernacle one by making proper correspondences. So here, what we're doing is we're trying to make correspondences between a number of modern scientific ideas with the vision of Yechezkel. But as we've said, this has been the theme throughout all of our learning here, is what Yechezkel is being shown is the fabric of the universe, the inner workings of the universe. And the inner workings of the physical universe are connected to the spiritual universe. And so ultimately it's all one. And Yechezkel, in very short amount of verses, is using different symbolic language, different metaphors to try to explain this vision of the fabric of the universe as he's experiencing it. So another teaching from Rav Ginsburg, which is very important here, is that the word Kabbalah, which equals 137, is seen to be made up of two words together. One is wisdom. Wisdom is chachma. Chachma equals 73. And the word for prophecy is nevuah. Nevuah equals 64. So if you add 64 and 73, you get 137, Kabbalah. So in other words, what is Kabbalah? Kabbalah is a combination of wisdom, intellect. It could be intuitive type of intellect, but it's intellect, but it's also prophetic. It is drawing a higher energy into our consciousness. And so Kabbalah is both very structured, very mental, very organized, and yet at the same time, it is transcending intellect and tuning into a higher type of wisdom. Okay, now we're going to see something very interesting here. In the 24th verse, so Yechezkel says this, Ve'eshma et kol kanfehem. Yechezkel hears the wings of these angels. Kikol mayim rabim, and it sounded to him like great waters. Imagine yourself at the beach, and the waves are crashing on the beach or the cliffs. Then it says Kikol Shaddai, like the voice. This is one of the names of God, Shin and Daled and Yud. He's hearing it like it's the voice of God. And it sounded to him like a great camp, like maybe thousands of angels, as it were, flapping their wings, sounding like crashing waves. But he puts in like the sound of God. This name, Shin Daled Yud, equals 314. Many people have pointed out that 314 just happens to be not exactly like that, but a very important in science, because pi is 3.14. And this is very important because we have a great paradox here, a phenomenal paradox, because pi is a number that never, as far as they know, never repeats itself. I believe they've run it through a computer and it goes in, I don't know, to millions or billions of digits, and it never repeats itself. So this name or this number mysteriously, in a sort, represents infinity. And yet what pi is, it's measuring the circumference of a circle, which is very somewhat limited. And in our tradition, this name, Shin Daled Yud, stands for a phrase, She'amar la'olamo dai. She'amar, that's the Shin. La'olamo, that's part of the Shin. Dai, Daled Yud. Shin, Daled, and Yud. Dai means enough, must speak. This is the energy that God said to the universe, enough, no more expansion. So here we have this tremendous paradox that this number 3.14 represents in a certain way a number that just goes on and on and on forever. And yet the name of this energy of God is, the physical world does have limits. Even with the James Webb telescope, where they're seeing billions of light years away, numbers we can't even imagine. We cannot even grasp the size of our physical universe. And it's expanding as we speak at phenomenal speeds. Phenomenal speeds. We don't feel it because of gravity, but it's a paradox. And we've mentioned over and over again that having the word chashmal here, and it's mentioned twice already, in the beginning of his vision and now towards the end of his vision. And it will be mentioned one more time in a future chapter that we will get to. Okay, so now I want to go a little bit farther, because in the book of Exodus, God at a certain point says to Moshe and the Jewish people, I am sending my angel before you to lead the way. And if anyone wants to look it up, it's the 23rd chapter, the 20 and 21st verses. And God says, listen to this angel, because my name is in him. There are different explanations, but one of them is, who is this angel that they're talking about? And one of the explanations that this is the angel called Metatron. He's considered in a certain way the highest of the angels. An angel that has a lot to do with how this world runs. Now remember, angels are messengers. That is the definition. And so Metatron has no power of its own, just like the sun has no power. Idol worship came and attributed godly attributes to the sun. The sun is simply a messenger of God. It's doing its solar duties. So why should I bring this up here about this angel? This angel, the name Metatron, also equals 314. And in the ancient text of Maaseh Merkavah, we haven't explained this yet, we'll get to it. They're called Heichalot literature, the literature of the palaces. And this came from 2,000 years ago, and they're considered explanations of Maaseh Merkavah. In those texts and later texts also, Metatron has another name, and it's Yophiel, which literally means the Yofi, the beauty of God. Now it turns out that this name Yophiel equals 137. And so Yophiel is Metatron, just a different name. And here, 137, as we're seeing, because of the Ophanim, is an intrinsic number embedded in the vision of Yechezkel. And just like we're talking about Yechezkel seeing the framework or the fabric of the universe, how energy and matter coupled together, how all of the worlds are enclosed one in the other. The Chariot, angels, are enclosed in the Ophanim. And the Merkavah is carrying the throne, and that is the Ruach of the Merkavah is in the Chariot, which are in the Ophanim. They're all connected. And so it's very interesting that this angel called Yophiel, he is considered like the angel that is like arranging everything in this world. That's his job. He's a CEO. He's CEO of Olam Ha'asiyah. You could say it that way. Okay. Okay, now there's a few more ideas I want to get to tonight, and we might be going a little bit longer, but we're on a roll here now. And so I want to mention something that we're going to get to this in much deeper. That in the Gemara, there are the one chapter deals with Maaseh Merkavah extensively. Maaseh Bereshit, Maaseh Merkavah. We've mentioned it before. It's the tractate of Chagiga. It's approximately 5 or 6 pages. It doesn't sound like a lot, 5 or 6 pages. You could spend a lifetime, and I'm not saying that lightly, on these 5 or 6 pages. One of the statements that they make is very relevant to Maaseh Merkavah, because we're talking tonight about the Ophanim and the Chariot and Metatron and Yophiel, all these angels. And we see already, and we're going to go deeper into this, that each world has a strata of angels. And they're all connected, but each one has its like home base. We'll put it that way. And each one is enclosed in the other ones. But in the Gemara, they make an incredible statement. And it says, this is, anyone who wants to look it up, it's on the 14th page of Chagiga, 14a. It says, Kol Yoma v'Yoma, Nivra'in Malachei HaShoret. Every single day, administering angels are created. Minahar Dinur, from a river of fire. V'amrei Shira, they say song, ubatle, and they cease to exist. As it says, Shneamar, Chadashim lebakarim rabba monetecha. They are new every morning. Great is your praise. So here, there's an opinion. There's a second opinion that's brought that angels are created from the breath of God's mouth, as it were. But here, it's fine, and they're not really arguing with each other, because in the Torah, God is called he's called a fiery reality. And the Torah is called Eish Dat Lamo, a fiery law. God is called an Eish Ochelet, an all-consuming fire. And that is why God cannot fully reveal himself because it would nullify the world. God is, we'll use the term fire. And we have to understand that it's a metaphor for God's infinite energy. So listen what it says here, that every day ministering angels are created from a river of fire. They sing song and they cease to exist. So this is a statement from 2,000 years ago. They now know, and you can look it up, that every, I'll call it a billionth of a second, in the entire universe, there are particles that come into existence for a billionth of a second, and they then cease to exist. This is a scientific fact, and it's happening in the entire universe. This is what we call Uvetuvo mechadesh b'chol yom tamin maseh breshit. God in his goodness is renewing the works of creation every day. And many years ago, Kabbalah explained it's not like every day. It's every split second God is recreating the world. So this statement, this is an example of what we started this class with, that they made this statement that God is creating angels. And here we're seeing that, and we discussed last week that particles are called messengers, just like angels are called messengers. Yeah, certain particles are called messenger particles because they're transmitting energy. Just like, let's say, in the synapses of the brain, you have electric pulses that are happening millions a second. We have no idea how complex our brains are. So this is just an incredible idea. It's just really, it's what I said before. When the sages made this statement, so the question is, if now we know that what they were explaining in their metaphors is true, how did they know that? They didn't have the instruments. Today we have the instruments that they can split an atom. They can see all the particles. They can shoot them through these colliders. It's amazing what they can do. And if anyone is watching what the Webb telescope is sending back to us, but they didn't have these instruments. So how did this? Revelation. Through revelation. This is what we want to explain about Yechezkel. Especially what we're explaining tonight. Did Yechezkel understand how an atom works? Did Yechezkel understand about electrons and protons and light being a wave and a particle? Not in the terms that I just used, but on the level of being a vessel for higher wisdom. He was the Merkavah. He was the Merkavah. And there is a statement in the Gemara about Avram, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. And it says, Ha'avot hen ha'merkavah. The patriarchs, they are the chariot. What did they mean? They meant, what is it? Again, the chariot in this vision is carrying the throne of God. And it's carrying Yechezkel's consciousness to be able to experience that. And or God is allowing the prophet to have this vision for reasons that only God knows. But we've proposed that because Yechezkel is towards the end of prophecy, that before the age of prophecy would end, that God wanted this inner fabric of the universe kind of mystical vision to be given over to human beings. Okay, so I want to end with one more idea. Because we've been talking about the number 137, and we have talked about Chashmal extensively throughout this series. What happens when you put these two numbers together? 137 and 378. So here you get 515, which equals prayer. So now I want to explain the connection here. There's some very, very deep connections. And it's interesting. I just thought of this. I'm giving this over in Parshat Ve'et Hanan. Ve'et Hanan means God, Moshe, is praying to God to let him come into the land of Israel. Ve'et Hanan, it's translated in different ways. He pleaded, he elicited God's graciousness, he prayed, he requested, but it means prayer. Ve'et Hanan. Ve'et Hanan equals 515. And from that, the well-known teaching is that he prayed 515 prayers to be able to come into Eretz Israel. Now, this number 515 also equals something that we mentioned tonight, Shirah. These angels that are created every split second from the river of fire, and I didn't emphasize enough before that when you go through these 28 verses, the idea of fire comes up over and over again, that the Chariot, these living beings, are being emanated from fire. The Chashmal is coming from the fire. It's all coming from the fire. It's all coming from God. It's all coming from a vision that is coming straight from God. But remember what the Talmud said. They are created from a river of fire. They sing, and then they cease to exist. So in our daily prayers in Shachrit, so before we say the Shema, we talk about these angels. And this is where we're going to pick up next week. Because every day in the morning, we talk about these angels praising God. And call it like the epitome or the climax is, and this is where we're going to pick up next week, is from the vision of Isaiah, where the angels call back and forth to each other, holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole world is full of his glory. I'm leaving that for right now. That's where we're going to start next week. But I just want to say that it's very descriptive, very poetic about how these angels are giving permission one to the other to praise God. And the whole creation is praising God. And it says, Yotzer Mishratim Ba'asher Mishratav Kulam Omdim Barum Omlam Umashmiim yir yachad b'kol divrei Elokim chaim melech olam. It says that God who fashions the ministering angels, all of whose ministering angels stand at the summit of the universe and proclaim with awe together loudly the words of the living God and the King of the universe. And it's all of this is talked about as song. The angels are singing God's praise. So here, these angels that come into existence for a billionth of a second, they're singing God's praises. So what's interesting is that 515, the combination of this number 137 and the chashmal equals prayer. And so when we look, and song, and in short, for those who have my book, The Mystical Power of Music, the whole idea is that song are vibrations. That's what music is, vibrations. When you pluck a string of a guitar, or you pluck a key on the piano, what you are literally doing is creating vibrations. Those vibrations are carried by sound waves to our ear. They enter into our brain. The brain translates it into music. But music are vibrations. That's what they are. And so in this expression, he fashions angels, all of whom are ministering angels. So our tradition explains that there's two types of angels that are being described here. One are the angels that sing for a split second, and they're being created at every split second. It means that the basis of the universe is song. We usually say in the morning, Baruch She'amar v'haya olam. Blessed is the one who spoke and the world came into being. But here we're saying at a deeper level, blessed is the one who sang and the world came into being. Because remember, these angels are being created by God. They're coming from a river of fire. This river of fire is coming directly from God. They are the messengers of the constant renewal of creation. And it's all singing. And that's why even though they haven't proven it yet, but we'll call it the cutting edge of science now is what's called string theory. And they're proposing that the smallest particles of matter, much smaller than electrons or neutrons or protons, like so small they can't even see them yet, even with the most advanced instruments, but they're all vibrating. That's what it's called, string theory. And the vibrations create our reality. And every particle every string is vibrating at a different rate. And that's what makes the elements. That is what makes all matter. And we are a product of the vibrations of the universe. Brian Greene, in his classic book, The Elegant Universe, so he says the metaphor of creation being music has taken on a startling reality. As he was comparing it to what the ancients called the harmony of the spheres. The ancients knew this. That's what I'm trying to say. Through revelation, that's why the Talmud writes this thing, that these angels are singing, meaning everything is vibrations, everything is song, everything is prayer. And that's why the third temple, especially coming right after Tisha B'Av, when we're praying for the third temple, will be called, God says, the third temple will be called the house of my prayer for all people. And some explain it, this will be a place that all peoples will be able to come and pray to God. But the other explanation is God says, this is the house of my prayer. That when we talk about physically, scientifically, everything being vibrations, everything being music, this is God singing the world into reality at every split second. All of this is a part of what Yechezkel is experiencing and trying to explain in a very, very 28 verses, but all of this is connected. And we started the class with the idea, and I'll end the class, the same thing, is we're not claiming that Yechezkel understood these things in scientific terminology, linguistics, but he was given a vision. And as we said, the prophet, or the one who has divine inspiration, doesn't always know the full import of what is coming through them. I'll end with it just helps us understand. You can find this on YouTube. There's a phenomenal interview with Bob Dylan. It was on 60 Minutes. You can find it on YouTube. And it was done, I think, around 10, 12, maybe years ago. Dylan is in his 70s already. And a lot of the questions, he, of course, are reflecting. But one of the questions he was asked is, can you write songs like you used to? Remember, he's the only singer who ever won the Nobel Prize of Literature. His influence on modern culture is enormous, absolutely enormous. And they asked him, do you think you could still write songs like those classics? And he said, no, I don't think so. And he said, why not? And he answered, and I'm just paraphrasing. He answered, he basically said, I don't know where those lyrics came from. He was basically saying, I was a channel. I don't know how I wrote that. And then I remember he started rattling off one of these songs, and the poetry is like, when you hear it, I know as a teenager, when I heard these lyrics, I was like, I can't believe anyone could come up with this. I just, beyond me. I'm only bringing this, it's just so we could all try to understand what I'm saying here. Dylan was saying is, I don't know how these came through me. Shlomo Carlebach said the same thing. I don't know where, I just pulled them down. I just caught, he used to say, I caught them. He was hearing them up in heaven, and he was privileged to catch them while the angels were singing them. He was able to catch it. May we all merit this kind of higher inspiration, higher wisdom. And that is, in a certain way, the idea of why are we learning all of this? Why is it important that we're trying to explore the very depths of this one vision that he had. And we're in a line of thousands of years of people trying to understand the workings of the chariot. And each generation is adding new insight into what these words were conveying. Here, as we're approaching the Messianic era, and technology is racing ahead of us at tremendous speeds, we can barely keep up, is these kind of revelations of the inner workings of our prophetic tradition is really opening up the gates. And we are told that when Mashiach comes, prophecy will be available again for everyone. May we merit to see it quickly and in our days.